Nonfiction gets a bad rap for being dull and difficult to read, where in fact, they can be exciting and invoke inquiry and further exploration of various topics. Tracking Trash is a perfect example of this. This is a big issue text that informs readers and pushes them to be activists for the cause. Tracking Trash is a great text to use to talk with students about setting up a text and how they should set up their own writing. It's great to use this text to talk about planning and inquiry, research that's involved in writing, organizing your text, and what audience that you're going to write to, and information beyond the main idea of the topic that will help the writer inform the reader. On pages 2 and 3 of the text, there's a really good example of what the author had to do in order to plan and the inquiry that they had that led to their further research. In part of our readings on the Inc. blog post, The Problem of Knowing and Pearls of Wisdom from Inc. bloggers by Jan Greenberg and April Pulley-Sire, they discussed different ways of coming up with your writing ideas. One of those was writing with comfort, and the other one was writing about things that you're not comfortable with or things that you don't know so that you can learn. And that's something that a writer has to decide what they're going to do. Do they want to write to learn, or do they want to write about something that they know a lot about? On this particular page, we see that this author actually poses a question: what forces drive the ocean currents? And this is a question that's going to be answered periodically throughout the entire text. And this is a good spot in the text to show writers that they need to be thinking about the end in mind. They need to be thinking about what is the process that the reader is going to go through in order to understand the main idea of the text. Many of the writers on the Inc. blog post discussed the research that went involved in creating their texts. They talked about the use of traditional nonfiction items such as encyclopedias or internet sites to create their outlines, and then expanding their research from there. They talked about the travel. Every single one of the bloggers talked about the amount of travel that they had to do to get resources, to talk to people and such, and there was a lot involved in that. They talked about how writing is a group project. This was specific to Deborah Heiligman, who discussed that you're assembling the voices of those who give you information and you're putting it all together. And also how putting yourself into what you're writing about is really, really important. You have to become part of what you're writing so you can understand the thoughts, the feelings, and such. So this would be a really good point to talk to writers about what all goes into researching a nonfiction, to write a nonfiction text. On this particular page, you see the bibliographic notes where it talks about the source that the writer got a lot of their information from. And in this particular case, it was from the Beachcombers Alert, and she's giving credit where credit is due there. This particular page shows how the author had to work with many, many people, and they're giving acknowledgement to those people for the hard work that they put in order to make this book possible. It also shows that a writer has to put a lot of effort into the information that they're getting, making sure that it's correct and talking to a lot of people and verifying that this information is correct before they put it out there to be published, because they want to make sure that the information that they're presenting is true. And this is something that young writers need to know, and they need to know that they have to back up their information. They need to verify their information. They can't just find information and put it in there and assume that it is true. Here we take a look at the contents page, and the contents page is a really good place to show writers how an author may organize their information. They have to understand that there's a specific design to how the book was put together and the order in which chapters are presented in. So going to a contents page and showing them and having them discuss why the author may have put certain chapters before other chapters would be really important. It would then be a good idea to take the readers into the chapters themselves. The way this text was structured is that there are two parts to each chapter. One is focused on the main idea, the idea of the trash and tracking the trash and everything that was involved in that. But then there's another part to it, in this particular case, longitude and latitude, where it shows content-specific information. It's giving in-depth information on words or an idea that is specific to what was mentioned in the text. So it's providing more information, and it's expanding the reader's knowledge. But it doesn't have to be read that way. So writers need to understand that they can provide extra information, and there's a structure to how they can provide that information. They don't have to include it in the main body of their text, but maybe as an anecdote within the text. Thinking about the audience in which you are writing to is really important. Tracking Trash is a really good book to discuss the audience in which you are writing to. Take, for example, this image of the shoe and the duck floating in the water. Now, this is a backyard experiment that the scientist did in order to prove that the ducks and the other bath toys would float and travel further at a faster pace than the shoes would, because they float above water and the shoes float below water, and he wanted to prove this to back up his theory that the bath toys would arrive on land faster than the shoes would, because the wind would help push them along. How fun would it be for a writer to write something as interesting as ducks and other bath toys and shoes floating in the ocean? And a young reader would really be interested in reading about something as interesting as ducks or other bath toys and shoes floating in the ocean. A great piece to this book is the factual information that the author does provide. Nonfiction texts can be read for enjoyment, but they can also be read to gather more information for research. So it would be a great piece to this text would be to teach writers how they could use this to model their own writing, to present information in their own writing that somebody else could use in further research on that particular topic. So teaching writers to write with the idea that their writing could be used for somebody else's research further down the road. And this particular page shows a data table. A data table will be a great thing for an author to include that a future reader could use for research. The author does a wonderful thing here to really promote the reader's interest and the reader's understanding of the text. They provide a lot of background information that relates directly to the big problem, which is the trash that is in the ocean. And it lends itself nicely to a quote from one of the blog posters. And that is, when the web of information grows and becomes clearer, it makes it easier to tell the story to the readers. And that's by Anne Balsam. And what I think she means by that, and why I think the author of this particular text did what they did, is that there are so many pieces that go together to create the story. There's so many different influences to specific problems, and the author includes that here. So it's important to teach the writers that they need to provide information beyond the main idea to reinforce the main idea. And that's exactly what they did here in Tracking Trash. So this will be a great part to teach the writers themselves that, look, you don't have to talk specifically about your main idea the entire book or the entire essay, whatever you're writing. You can provide a little bit of background information that just reinforces what you're trying to say. There's also a great quote from one of the blog posters, Deborah Heiligman again, and she says that if there's something important that you don't know, it should be in the story. And I think that's what the author did here with this image of the scientist holding up the trash that they took from the garbage patch in the middle of the Pacific Ocean. And this is one of those things where the author is adding more information, and it's something that maybe people don't know, that the trash is really, really tiny, and it looks exactly like a lot of the plankton. And the author felt that this was an important piece that they had to add in to the text. In the article Nonfiction as Mentor Text Style, the authors discussed grabbing the reader's attention, instilling curiosity, creating a sense of immediacy, and making the reader feel connected. And I think in Tracking Trash, a really good example of this is Chapter 4, The Garbage Patch. And the garbage patch is a major problem in the oceans today. And I think this gives the reader a sense of curiosity, a sense of wanting to take action and feeling connected because they live on this planet and that's a problem on this planet. And this would be a really good place to stop and talk to the writers about how can you grab the reader's attention. And it doesn't necessarily have to be at the very beginning. It could be in the middle of the text too, because you want to grab their attention at the beginning, but then you want to maintain it throughout the entire text. So this is a good spot where this author created a chapter that directly connected to pretty much to anybody who read this book, because it does involve anybody who picks up this book, because we live on this planet and this is a problem on our planet. So great place to stop and teach the writers about keeping curiosity going, to wanting the reader to feel connected to the text. This next page would be a good spot to talk to the writers about keeping that interest with their readers and getting them to want to take action. In this particular page of Tracking Trash, the author actually says, what can you do? And goes on to discuss what you can do in order to help with this problem. So again, another good moment to teach writers within this book how they can keep their readers connected and then doing something beyond the book. What I really liked about this book is that there are so many opportunities to write from this text. For example, the readers themselves can actually do what the author suggests and go out and collect trash and from their beaches and take detailed notes regarding the trash that they picked up, and then they could explain the impact of their findings, and they could write a scientific summary on how their findings could have an impact on the local marine life. Another great opportunity would be for the readers to actually write their own newspaper article about their findings on the beach then, or maybe create an action plan for a beach cleanup based off of their findings from what they've discovered. I love the idea of the readers actually writing their own Beachcombers Alert newsletter too, which is featured here. This could be a great time to talk about structure and of a nonfiction text, especially an article, and it's short, so I know a lot of teachers are pressed for time, so this might be a good opportunity to do a short newspaper article. You could do some letter writing. They could write a letter to a local fishing company and ask them what they're doing to ensure that their fishing materials are not harming the ocean. You could even do a fiction text and do a story about a piece of trash in the ocean, and it's floating through the ocean and all the different adventures that it goes on out there in the wide ocean, the different marine life that it comes across. So a bit of a cross between nonfiction, because the writers would have to do a little bit of research on the type of marine life that they would come across in the different oceans and such, and the weather patterns. But then also there's that fiction element, because they're completely making up a story. So a lot of writing could come from this particular text, which is fantastic.